Welcome, dear friends, to a thrilling tale of ambition, betrayal, and redemption. Enjoy the story. The sleek river cruise ship, aptly named the Remedy, glided smoothly along the Hudson River, its deck aglow with twinkling lights and the sounds of clinking champagne glasses. On board, the creme de la creme of New York's pharmaceutical world mingled with old college buddies, all gathered to celebrate the meteoric rise of Alex Smith and his rapidly expanding drugstore chain, Accessible. Alex, a dashingly handsome man in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a megawatt smile that had graced countless business magazines, stood at the helm of the ship, basking in the adoration of his guests. He'd come a long way from the scrappy pharmacy student with big dreams and empty pockets. To Accessible, he toasted, raising his glass. May we continue to bring affordable healthcare to every corner of America. The crowd cheered, and Alex felt a surge of pride. This was his moment, the culmination of years of hard work and shrewd business deals. He was on top of the world, and nothing could bring him down. Or so he thought. As he made his rounds, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he came face to face with Victor Olson, his old college roommate and now a successful hospital administrator. "Hell of a party, Alex," Victor grinned, clapping him on the back. "Just like the old days, eh? Remember those frat parties we used to throw?" Alex laughed, memories of their wild college days flooding back. "How could I forget? I'm pretty sure I'm still banned from that one bar in Boston." Victor's grin widened. "Speaking of the old days, I couldn't help but notice a certain someone missing from the guest list. Whatever happened to Tina Silver?" At the mention of Tina's name, Alex felt a jolt in his chest. Tina Silver, the one who got away, the girl he'd been madly in love with in college, who'd broken his heart when she'd chosen a semester abroad over their relationship. "Tina?" Alex said, trying to keep his voice casual. "I haven't thought about her in years. No idea what she's up to these days." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's funny because I ran into her at a conference last month. She's back in New York, working for one of your competitors, actually." Alex's mind raced. Tina was back in New York and working in pharma? How had he not known this? "You should invite her," Victor continued, oblivious to Alex's inner turmoil. "For old time's sake, I'm sure she'd love to see how well you've done for yourself." Alex mumbled something non-committal and quickly excused himself, his head spinning. As he made his way to the bar for another drink, he couldn't shake the image of Tina, her flowing chestnut hair, those mischievous green eyes, the way her laugh could light up a room. He was so lost in thought that he nearly bumped into his wife, Lily, who was deep in conversation with one of the board members' wives. "Oh, there you are, darling," Lily said, her voice warm but with an undercurrent of tension that only Alex could detect. "Are you enjoying your big night?" Alex plastered on his best smile. "Of course, honey. It's perfect. You've outdone yourself with the planning." Lily beamed, but Alex could see the strain around her eyes. At 52, Lily was still a striking woman, with her elegant blonde updo and impeccable fashion sense. But lately, the 8-year age gap between them had started to feel more pronounced. As he watched Lily charm the guests, Alex's mind drifted back to the day they'd met, 6 years ago. The annual Pharmacon was in full swing, the convention center a maze of booths showcasing the latest in pharmaceutical innovations. Alex, then the ambitious owner of a small but growing chain of pharmacies, was on the hunt for new suppliers and potential investors. That's when he saw her. Lily Vitale stood out like a rose among thorns, her refined presence a stark contrast to the sea of suits and lab coats. She was examining a display of antique apothecary bottles with keen interest. Intrigued, Alex approached. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said, nodding towards the bottles. "Although I have to say, I prefer our modern child-proof caps. Fewer accidental poisonings that way." Lily turned, a smile playing on her lips. "Indeed. Although one could argue that the artistry has been somewhat lost in the name of safety." Alex was immediately captivated. Not only was she gorgeous, but she clearly had a brain to match. "Alex Smith," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Lily Vitale," she replied, her handshake firm and confident. "Art historian, specializing in the intersection of medicine and art throughout history. They fell into an easy conversation, Alex fascinated by Lily's knowledge and Lily impressed by Alex's passion for making healthcare more accessible. It wasn't until much later that Alex learned Lily was the daughter of Jonathan Vitale, the CEO of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. Their whirlwind romance took New York by storm. Despite the age difference and raised eyebrows from Lily's high society friends, they were married within a year. With Lily's connections and Alex's drive, accessible pharmacies grew exponentially. Now, 6 years later, Alex had everything he'd ever dreamed of: a beautiful wife, a thriving business, respect and admiration from his peers. So why did the mere mention of Tina Silver's name send his heart racing like a lovesick teenager? As the party continued around him, Alex made a decision. He pulled out his phone and fired off a quick email to his assistant. Find contact info for Tina Silver, pharma industry, recently returned to NYC. What harm could come from reconnecting with an old friend, right? The party was in full swing, the dance floor packed with revelers moving to the beat of a live band. Alex stood by the railing, nursing his third scotch of the night and trying to calm his nerves. He'd received a reply from his assistant. Tina was indeed working for a rival pharmacy chain, and she'd accepted his last-minute invitation to the party. Get a grip, Smith, he muttered to himself. It's been 20 years. She's probably changed. You've changed. Nothing's going to happen. But even as he tried to convince himself, Alex couldn't help but straighten his tie and run a hand through his hair as he scanned the crowd. And then, suddenly, there she was. Tina Silver seemed to part the sea of guests as she walked in, turning heads with every step. Time had been kind to her. She was still as breathtakingly beautiful as she'd been in college, maybe even more so. Her chestnut hair was shorter now, cut into a sleek bob that accentuated her high cheekbones. She wore a slinky emerald dress that matched her eyes perfectly. Alex's mouth went dry. He downed the rest of his scotch in one gulp and made his way towards her. "Tina!" he called out, his voice slightly hoarse. "You made it." She turned, those green eyes widening in recognition. "Alex Smith," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Look at you, all grown up and successful." Before Alex could respond, Tina closed the distance between them and pulled him into a hug. The familiar scent of her perfume, had she really not changed it in 20 years? Enveloped him, sending his mind reeling back to stolen kisses in the college library and lazy Sunday mornings in her dorm room. "It's good to see you, Alex," Tina said as she pulled back, her hands lingering on his arms. "When I got your invitation, I almost didn't believe it. The great Alex Smith, remembering little old me?" Alex laughed, trying to ignore the electricity he felt where her hands touched him. "Come on, Tina, as if I could ever forget you." They fell into easy conversation, catching up on the years they'd missed. Tina had indeed studied abroad, then stayed in Europe for several years working for a major pharmaceutical company. She'd only recently returned to the States, taking a job with one of Accessible's main competitors. "But enough about me," Tina said, her eyes twinkling. "Look at all this." She gestured around the lavish party. "You've done well for yourself, Alex. I always knew you would." Alex felt a surge of pride, mixed with a hint of something else. Regret, maybe? "Thanks, Tina. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure." "And I hear congratulations are in order in your personal life as well," Tina continued. "Married to Lily Vitale, no less. Quite a catch." At the mention of Lily's name, Alex felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so caught up in reconnecting with Tina, he'd almost forgotten about his wife. "Speaking of," Tina said, looking over Alex's shoulder, "I believe your better half is headed this way." Alex turned to see Lily approaching, a tight smile on her face. He could read the tension in her posture, the slight narrowing of her eyes as she took in the scene before her. "Darling," Lily said, slipping her arm through Alex's, "aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Alex cleared his throat. "Of course. Lily, this is Tina Silver, an old college friend. Tina, my wife, Lily." The two women sized each other up, an almost palpable current of rivalry passing between them. Tina's smile was all warmth and charm, but there was a glint in her eye that Alex recognized from their college days, the look she got when she saw something she wanted. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lily," Tina said smoothly. "Alex is a lucky man." "Indeed he is," Lily replied, her grip on Alex's arm tightening slightly. "And I'm a lucky woman. We make quite the team, don't we, darling?" Alex nodded, feeling caught between two powerful forces. "Absolutely," he managed to say. As the conversation continued, filled with polite small talk and thinly veiled barbs, Alex couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. The rational part of his brain knew he should be focusing on his wife, on the empire they'd built together. But another part, a part he thought he'd left behind in his youth, was awakening. The party continued late into the night, but for Alex, everything faded into the background, except for Tina's laugh and the memory of what they'd once shared. Little did he know, this chance reunion was about to set in motion a chain of events that would threaten everything he'd worked so hard to build. In the weeks following the party, Alex found himself thinking about Tina more and more. It started innocently enough, a coffee meeting to discuss potential collaboration between their companies, a quick lunch to catch up further on old times. But soon, their encounters became more frequent, more intimate. Tina was everything Lily wasn't: spontaneous, carefree, full of the passion and fire that had drawn Alex to her in college. Where Lily was all sophistication and restraint, Tina was raw energy and excitement. One evening, after a particularly tense board meeting, Alex found himself in a dimly lit bar with Tina, both of them several drinks in. "You seem stressed, Alex," Tina purred, her hand resting dangerously high on his thigh. "All work and no play make Alex a dull boy, remember?" Alex laughed, the alcohol buzzing pleasantly in his veins. "Oh, I remember. You always knew how to have a good time." Tina leaned in closer, her lips brushing his ear. "I still do. Want me to show you?" That night marked the beginning of their affair. Alex told himself it was just a fling, a way to recapture his youth. But as the weeks turned into months, he found himself falling deeper and deeper. The gifts started small, a designer watch here, a weekend getaway there. But Tina's tastes were expensive, and Alex soon found himself dipping into company funds to keep up with her demands. "Oh, Alex," Tina cooed as she unwrapped the keys to a brand new sports car. "You shouldn't have." "Only the best for you," Alex replied, pushing down the voice in his head that was screaming about the mountain of debt he was accruing. To cover his tracks, Alex took out loans using Lily as a guarantor, forging her signature on the documents. It was risky, he knew, but he couldn't stop. The thrill of his time with Tina was addictive, more potent than any drug his pharmacies could dispense. But as Alex's affair deepened, so did Lily's suspicions. She noticed the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the dwindling bank accounts. And while part of her wanted to confront Alex, another part, the part that remembered the shy, ambitious young man she'd fallen in love with, held back, hoping it was all in her imagination. Little did Lily know, Alex's deceptions were about to take an even darker turn, one that would put her very life at risk. As Alex's affair with Tina consumed more of his time and resources, he began to see Lily as an obstacle. Her family's pharmaceutical empire, which had once been a source of support and connections, now represented a tempting solution to his mounting financial troubles. If only he could gain control of Lily's assets, he could pay off his debts and set himself up for a new life with Tina. But how? The idea came to him one night as he was restocking the medicine cabinet. His eyes fell on a bottle of powerful antidepressants, and a sinister plan began to form. Using his pharmaceutical knowledge, Alex began to secretly administer a cocktail of drugs to Lily, disguising them as vitamin supplements. At first, the changes were subtle: mood swings, fatigue, confusion. But as he increased the dosage, Lily's condition deteriorated rapidly. "Darling, are you feeling all right?" Alex asked one morning, feigning concern as Lily stumbled into the kitchen, her eyes unfocused. I don't know," Lily mumbled. "Everything feels so strange lately. Maybe I'm coming down with something." Alex nodded sympathetically. "Why don't you let me call Dr. Harrison? I'm sure he can prescribe something to help." Of course, the medication prescribed by their family doctor only compounded the effects of Alex's secret drug regimen. Within weeks, Lily was a shell of her former self, depressed, anxious, and increasingly dependent on Alex for everything. As Lily's mental state declined, Alex began to plant seeds of doubt among their friends and business associates. "I'm so worried about Lily," he would confide, his voice dripping with false concern. "She's been so forgetful lately, making strange decisions. I fear she might not be fit to manage her family's company anymore." The stage was set. All Alex needed now was for Lily to sign over control of her assets to him. But even in her diminished state, Lily proved more resilient than he'd anticipated. "I don't understand, Alex," she said weakly one evening as he presented her with a stack of legal documents. "Why do you need control of my shares? I thought we were partners in this." Alex struggled to keep the frustration out of his voice. "It's for your own good, sweetheart. You're not well. Let me take care of everything until you're better." But Lily, despite her confusion and fatigue, refused to sign. A lifetime of business acumen and self-reliance wasn't so easily erased, even by Alex's chemical machinations. Realizing he needed to act fast before his plan unraveled, Alex decided to bring in outside help to validate Lily's mental state and witness her signing over her assets. But finding someone who wouldn't ask too many questions proved challenging. As Alex's desperation grew, so did the risks he was willing to take. Little did he know, his search for a compliant witness was about to lead him to someone who would change everything and potentially bring his entire house of cards crashing down. The gravel crunched under the tires of Alex's luxury SUV as he pulled up to a dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of a small rural town. He wrinkled his nose at the overgrown yard and peeling paint. This was a far cry from the polished world of Manhattan pharmaceuticals he was used to. "This better be worth it," he muttered, stepping out of the car and straightening his designer suit. Alex had heard about Samuel Ignatius through a chain of increasingly shady connections. Rumor had it that the old hermit was a former notary who'd gone off the grid years ago. If anyone would sign off on Lily's mental state without asking questions, it would be someone with nothing left to lose. He rapped on the weathered door, plastering on his most charming smile. After a moment, it creaked open to reveal a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a Tolkien novel. Long gray beard, wild hair, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through Alex. "Mr. Ignatius," Alex ventured. "I'm Alex Smith. I was hoping we could discuss a delicate matter." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "You're a long way from Wall Street, Mr. Smith. What could you possibly want with an old hermit like me?" Alex quickly explained the situation, painting Lily as a troubled woman who needed help managing her affairs. He offered Samuel a substantial sum to act as a witness to her signing over control of her assets. To his surprise, Samuel didn't immediately agree. Instead, he stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I'll need to meet this wife of yours first. Bring her here tomorrow. If I deem her of sound mind, I'll witness your documents." Alex hesitated. He hadn't planned on bringing Lily out here, but what choice did he have? He needed this to be legal and binding. "Fine," he agreed. "We'll be here tomorrow afternoon." As Alex drove away, he didn't notice Samuel watching him with a knowing look in his eyes. The next day, Alex half-carried a heavily sedated Lily into Samuel's cabin. She looked around blearily, confusion etched on her face. Where are we, Alex?" she mumbled. "Just visiting an old friend, darling," Alex soothed, helping her onto a worn couch. "Mr. Ignatius here is going to help us with some paperwork." Samuel observed the scene with a frown. He approached Lily, kneeling down to look her in the eyes. "Mrs. Smith, how are you feeling today?" Lily's unfocused gaze drifted to Samuel's face. "Tired. Everything's so fuzzy." Samuel's frown deepened. He turned to Alex. "Mr. Smith, a word outside if you please." Once they were on the porch, Samuel's demeanor changed completely. Gone was the addled hermit act, replaced by sharp intelligence and barely contained anger. "What the hell have you done to that woman?" he demanded. Alex stumbled back, caught off guard. I don't know what you mean. She's ill, that's all." Samuel snorted. "Ill, my ass. I've seen those symptoms before, Mr. Smith. Your wife isn't sick. She's being poisoned." Alex's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Dr. Samuel Ignatius, former chief of addiction medicine at New York Presbyterian," Samuel replied. "And you, Mr. Smith, are in a world of trouble." Alex's mind raced. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He needed to get Lily out of there, needed to damage control. But before he could move, Samuel's hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength. Don't even think about it. Your wife needs help, and by God, she's going to get it. You're going to leave her here with me, and you're going to do it now. You can't do this, Alex sputtered. I'll call the police. Samuel's laugh was without humor. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd be very interested in why you've been drugging your wife. Now get out of here before I change my mind about not calling them myself. Defeated and panicking, Alex had no choice but to leave. As he drove away, he saw Samuel gently leading a confused Lily back into the cabin. What had he done? And more importantly, how was he going to fix this mess? Over the next few weeks, Lily underwent a harrowing detox under Samuel's care. There were moments of clarity interspersed with bouts of confusion and withdrawal symptoms. But slowly, surely, the fog began to lift. One morning, Lily woke feeling more like herself than she had in months. She found Samuel in his small kitchen, brewing a pot of herbal tea. Good morning, Dr. Ignatius, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Samuel turned, a warm smile crinkling his weathered face. Ah, there she is. Welcome back to the land of the living, Mrs. Smith. Lily sat at the rustic kitchen table, accepting a steaming mug of tea. I remember everything now, she said quietly. What Alex did, how long he'd been poisoning me. Her voice broke on the last words. Samuel sat across from her, his eyes filled with compassion. I'm so sorry, Lily. No one should have to go through what you did. Lily took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. What happens now? That's up to you, Samuel replied. But if you'll allow me to make a suggestion, I think it's time we turned the tables on your husband. Over the next few days, Lily and Samuel hatched a plan. They knew Alex would eventually return, likely with another attempt to get Lily to sign over her assets. When he did, they'd be ready. Sure enough, a week later, the sound of Alex's SUV pulling up outside the cabin sent Lily's heart racing. She quickly assumed the vacant, confused expression she'd worn for so long, while Samuel transformed back into the doddering hermit. Alex burst through the door, a notary in tow. Lily, darling, I've been so worried. Are you feeling better? Lily blinked at him slowly. Alex? Is that you? Where am I? Alex's relief was palpable. He quickly introduced the notary and produced the documents for Lily to sign. It's just some routine paperwork, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. But as Lily reached for the pen, her hand shaking, Samuel spoke up. Before we proceed, Mr. Smith, I wonder if you might step outside with me for a moment. There's something you need to see. Confused but eager to get the signing over with, Alex followed Samuel onto the porch. As soon as the door closed behind them, Samuel's demeanor changed. I know what you've been doing, Mr. Smith, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Drugging your wife, embezzling from your company to fund your affair. It ends now. Alex's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Samuel produced a small plastic bag filled with pills. Recognize these? I found them in your wife's system. Highly illegal, highly dangerous. I wonder what the police would make of them. Alex lunged for the bag, but Samuel was quicker. He tutted. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away. Sign the divorce papers Lily's lawyer will be sending over, agree to her terms, and never contact her again. Otherwise, this evidence goes straight to the DA's office. Understand? Inside the cabin, Lily had dropped her act. She stood tall, her eyes clear and filled with a mixture of pain and determination as she faced the notary. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, she said firmly. I won't be signing anything today. In fact, I'll be initiating divorce proceedings against my husband for attempted murder and fraud. The notary, sensing the tension, quickly excused himself. As he hurried past Alex and Samuel on the porch, Alex knew it was over. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. You'll regret this, he snarled at Samuel before storming off to his car. As the sound of screeching tires faded away, Lily joined Samuel on the porch. Is it really over? She asked, her voice small. Samuel put a comforting hand on her shoulder. The worst is, yes. But you've got a long road ahead of you, Lily. Are you ready for it? Lily squared her shoulders, a spark of her old self shining through. More than ready. It's time I took back control of my life. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles and public scandals. Alex's crimes were exposed, sending shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry. Accessible pharmacy stock plummeted as investigations revealed the extent of his embezzlement and fraud. Lily, with Samuel by her side, testified against Alex in a highly publicized trial. Her powerful testimony of his abuse and manipulation left the courtroom stunned. "He didn't just try to take my money," Lily said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He tried to take my sanity, my identity, everything I was." Alex, his smug facade finally cracking, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and drug charges. Tina Silver, implicated in the embezzlement scheme, turned state's witness in exchange for a lighter sentence. As the dust settled, Lily found herself at a crossroads. Her family's pharmaceutical empire needed rebuilding, but she wasn't sure she had the strength to do it alone. One evening, as she and Samuel sat on the porch of his cabin, which had become a sort of sanctuary for her, Lily voiced her doubts. "I don't know if I can do this, Samuel," she admitted. "Maybe it's time to sell the company, start fresh." Samuel was quiet for a moment, then turned to her with a twinkle in his eye. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "it's time to use that company to do some real good in the world." Over the next year, Lily and Samuel worked tirelessly to transform her family's company. They shifted focus to developing affordable medications for rare diseases, established free clinics in underserved areas, and implemented strict ethical guidelines to prevent the kind of corruption that had flourished under Alex's leadership. And somewhere along the way, amid late-night strategy sessions and early morning coffee runs, Lily and Samuel's relationship deepened into something neither of them had expected. It was Samuel who finally broached the subject, on a crisp fall evening, much like the one when they'd first met. "Lily," he said, taking her hand, "I know I'm not exactly the kind of man you imagined ending up with. I'm older, set in my ways, but these past months with you, they've been the happiest of my life." Lily's eyes shimmered with tears as she squeezed his hand. "Oh, Samuel, you saved me in more ways than one. How could I not fall in love with you?" Their kiss, tender and full of promise, felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with purpose, integrity, and a love born from the ashes of betrayal. A year later. The grand opening of the Lily Vitale Center for Addiction Research was the event of the season in the medical community. As Lily cut the ribbon, Samuel by her side, she couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in just 2 years. Gone was the trophy wife, the woman who had lost herself in her husband's ambitions. In her place stood a powerful advocate for ethical pharmaceuticals and addiction treatment, respected not for her family name, but for her own accomplishments. As the crowd applauded, Lily caught sight of a familiar face in the audience. Victor Olson, Alex's old college friend, approached with a sheepish smile. "Lily, Dr. Ignatius," he greeted them. I owe you both an apology. If I hadn't pushed Alex to invite Tina to that party..." Lily held up a hand, stopping him. "You couldn't have known, Victor. What matters is what we do going forward. Are you still at New York Presbyterian?" Victor nodded and Lily smiled. "Good, because we're going to need partners in implementing our new treatment protocols. Interested?" As Victor eagerly agreed, Lily felt Samuel's arm slip around her waist. She leaned into him, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of their new neighborhood, a far cry from the glittering Upper East Side mansion Lily had once called home, Samuel turned to her with a mischievous grin. "So, Mrs. Soon-to-be Ignatius," he said, using the nickname that never failed to make Lily blush. "Any regrets?" Lily pretended to think for a moment, then laughed. "Just one," she said, her eyes twinkling, "that it took a near-death experience and a criminal investigation for me to find true happiness." As they continued their walk, planning their upcoming wedding and the next phase of their charitable work, Lily reflected on the twisted path that had led her here. She had lost so much: her marriage, her trust, years of her life to Alex's manipulations. But in that loss, she had found something far more valuable: her true self, a purpose that filled her with passion, and a love that was built on mutual respect and shared values. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself all those years ago at that pharmaceutical convention. It was better.